on your own when you thought no one was at home. I love you. I've always loved you from the very first time I caught you playing Grace's.
There are truths that change lives, and then there are truths that destroy the life you thought you wanted. Tom Haywood believed he knew exactly who he was. He believed he knew where his future was leading. He believed every important choice had already been made, long before he ever had the chance to question it. But what if everything he believed was built on a lie? What if the person he thought he understood most was hiding something that could change everything? And what if the greatest mistake of his life was not loving the wrong person, but failing to see the truth standing in front of him all along? Because sometimes the most dangerous secrets are not the ones people hide from others. They are the ones they hide from themselves. Tom had spent most of his life surrounded by certainty. Certainty was comfortable. Certainty was predictable. It required no courage because it demanded no difficult choices. Every expectation placed upon him had become part of who he was. Every promise made on his behalf had slowly transformed into a future he accepted without question. And for years, that had been enough. Or at least, he believed it was. The strange thing about certainty is that it rarely disappears all at once. It begins with a feeling, a hesitation, a quiet discomfort that cannot be explained. Something small enough to ignore, something easy to dismiss, until it isn't. For Tom, that feeling had begun months ago. At first, he could not identify it. His life looked exactly the same. His responsibilities remained unchanged. His future still stretched before him in the same direction it always had. Yet something felt different. Not around the world, around himself. There were moments when he would find his thoughts drifting without reason. Moments when conversations that should have felt important suddenly felt empty. Moments when laughter sounded distant. Moments when success felt strangely hollow. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Because somewhere deep inside him, a question had begun to form. A question he was not ready to answer. What if the life he was building did not belong to him? The thought unsettled him immediately. He pushed it away, ignored it, buried it beneath responsibility. But questions have a way of surviving, especially the ones that mattered most. And while Tom struggled to understand what was changing inside him, Mary was fighting a battle of her own. Unlike Tom, Mary understood uncertainty very well. She had lived with it for most of her life. She understood what it felt like to stand in rooms where nobody noticed her. She understood what it felt like to speak and wonder whether anyone was truly listening. She understood what it felt like to watch other people become the center of every story, while remaining quietly in the background of her own. It was not bitterness, it was acceptance. Or at least that was what she told herself, because acceptance is easier than disappointment. Hope is dangerous. Hope creates expectations. Hope creates possibilities, and possibilities can break your heart. For years, Mary had protected herself from that pain by expecting very little. But then, Tom had started paying attention. Not suddenly, not dramatically, gradually, dangerously. He had started listening when she spoke. He had started asking questions. He had remembered small details others forgot. And what seemed insignificant to everyone else had become impossible for Mary to ignore. Because there is something powerful about being seen by someone whose attention matters, especially when you never expected it. At first, she told herself it meant nothing. Then she told herself it meant too much. Neither explanation brought peace. The truth was far more complicated, because somewhere between friendship and silence, between expectation and possibility, something had begun to grow. Something neither of them fully understood, and neither of them knew what to do with it. The problem was not simply that Tom occupied her thoughts. The problem was that he had begun to change the way she saw herself. When someone sees value in you, it becomes harder to believe you have none. When someone listens, it becomes harder to remain invisible. And when someone makes you feel understood, it becomes impossible to return to the loneliness that existed before. That was the hidden danger. Not love, recognition. Because love can be denied. Recognition cannot. Tom saw her, and once that happened, nothing felt the same. Meanwhile, Tom remained unaware of the storm building around him. Or perhaps he was aware. Perhaps he simply lacked the courage to name it, because naming something makes it real, and reality demands action. The more he thought about Mary, the more uncomfortable he became. Not because her presence disturbed him, because her absence did. He noticed when she entered a room. He noticed when she left one. He noticed changes in her mood, changes in her voice, changes in her smile, and each observation created a new question. Why? Why did it matter? Why did her happiness matter? Why did her sadness matter? Why did her opinion matter? Why did losing a conversation with her feel like losing something valuable? Answers frightened him. So he stopped searching for them. Or at least he tried. But avoidance has never been stronger than truth. Truth waits. Truth watches. Truth returns. And eventually it asks to be heard. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly Tom became aware of something even more troubling. Mary was pulling away. Not dramatically, not obviously. Most people would never have noticed, but he did. Her conversations became shorter. Her smiles became rarer. Her presence became less frequent. She was creating distance, carefully, deliberately, and for reasons he could not explain, that distance hurt. It should not have mattered, yet it did, far more than it should have. The realization followed him everywhere. If she meant nothing, why did losing her presence feel like loss? If she was simply a friend, why did every step she took away from him feel wrong? If his future was already decided, why did the thought of a future without Mary suddenly feel impossible to imagine? Questions. Always questions. And with every question came another crack in the certainty he had spent years building. The hidden truth was getting closer. Closer than either of them realized. Closer than either of them were prepared for. Because while Tom struggled to understand his feelings, Mary had discovered something even more devastating. The greatest danger was not loving Tom. The greatest danger was believing he might love her back. That possibility terrified her. Not because she wanted it, because she did. Because hope had returned, and hope was the one thing she trusted least. Hope convinces people to risk everything. Hope whispers impossible things. Hope turns dreams into expectations, and expectations become heartbreak. Mary knew that, which is why she made a decision she believed would protect them both. She would step away. She would create distance. She would silence the feelings before they became impossible to control. Because some stories are not meant to happen. Some people are not meant to choose each other. At least, that was what she believed. But what if she was wrong? What if the truth neither of them wanted to face had already changed everything? And what if the secret waiting beneath their silence was far more powerful than either of them imagined? Because the moment Mary decided to walk away, someone else uncovered a truth that neither she nor Tom were prepared to hear. A truth that would force every hidden feeling into the light. And once that truth was revealed, nothing would ever be the same again. But who discovered it first? And why would that discovery threaten to destroy everything before Tom and Mary ever had the chance to understand what they truly meant to each other?
The most dangerous truths are not the ones that arrive with noise. They arrive quietly. So quietly that by the time you recognize them, they have already changed everything. The hidden truth surrounding Tom and Mary did not reveal itself through a dramatic confession. It did not appear in a moment of undeniable certainty. Instead, it emerged the way all life-changing truths do, through small moments that seemed insignificant at first and impossible to ignore later. Mary believed she had made the right decision. Distance was supposed to help. Distance was supposed to restore clarity. Distance was supposed to return everything to the way it had been before. But there was one problem. The further she moved away from Tom, the more she realized how deeply he had become part of her life. It was not simply his presence she missed, it was the version of herself she became around him. For the first time in years, she had felt understood. For the first time in years, she had felt visible. For the first time in years, she had felt like someone whose thoughts mattered, and losing that felt far more painful than she expected. Every day became a battle between reason and feeling. Reason reminded her that nothing could come from this. Reason reminded her that Tom's future was complicated. Reason reminded her of every obstacle standing between them. But feelings are stubborn things. They do not disappear because they are inconvenient. They do not vanish because they are unwanted. The more Mary tried to silence them, the louder they became. And somewhere else, Tom was fighting a remarkably similar battle. At first, he convinced himself her absence did not matter. People drift apart, conversations end, lives move forward. That was normal. That was reasonable. That was what he told himself, but every attempt to explain away her absence only made it more noticeable. The days felt different, the rooms felt quieter, the conversations felt incomplete, and the strangest part was that he could not explain why. Nothing important had happened, no promises had been made, no declarations had been spoken, yet something felt missing, something essential. For a man who had spent most of his life understanding exactly what he wanted, the uncertainty was unsettling, because uncertainty creates questions, and questions lead to truths. The more he examined his feelings, the less comfortable he became. He found himself replaying conversations, remembering details, revisiting moments he should have forgotten. A smile, a glance, a shared silence. Things that once seemed ordinary now carried a meaning he could no longer ignore. And slowly, a realization began to form, not all at once, not clearly, but steadily. The thought appeared, disappeared, and then returned, stronger each time. What if Mary was never the distraction? What if she was the answer? The possibility terrified him, because if it was true, then everything else became uncertain. Every plan, every expectation, every promise, everything. For years, his future had seemed simple. Now it felt fragile, like something that could shatter with a single honest conversation. And honesty was becoming increasingly difficult to avoid. The hidden truth was growing stronger, not because anyone was speaking it, because